Morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, let's talk a few minutes about fall winter transition fishing and the extension of it into the beginning of next year for many states versus Arizona that only has a couple months really of cold weather at the beginning of the year. So, I've changed a lot of the things that I do when I fish, a lot of them. I came back to it around 2013 after my then wife told me I needed to get a hobby. I said, well, why not go back to fishing because I love it. Uh, Logistically and a financial level, I probably shouldn't have because it can be really expensive if you're not careful. And I had only two hobbies that I really did besides target practice, and that was making RC planes and fishing. So, back then when I was doing it before, I was exceptionally good at both. And that's not a bragging thing. Like I really was. So it was a natural progression for me to go back to it. And wintertime is really my least favorite time to fish because they slow down so much. But it's still relatively easy to get them if you know the body of water and you do what you're supposed to do to attract whatever type of species at that point in time of the year. So it's possible while it's a little bit problematic because they tend to tighten up in groups. Either big pods of them that are really not bitey because they're kind of hunkering down and waiting out the weather, or smaller pockets of groups that can be even less bitey. I mean, they can be really picky and choosy. Now, that's different with ice fishing because you're playing right into that format of the way that they form up in schools at that point. And with ice fishing, some of the species like the pike and salmon and whatnot, they can have loners and have schools at the same time in different areas. That's why people usually drill multiple holes because in those lakes that they typically ice fish, there's multiple species. So it works out, and you're usually taking like really small glow jigs and tipping them with things like maggots, pieces of earthworm, corn. There's varieties of baits. So if you do it correctly, you can really have some good success. The difference with that in Arizona is that Arizona doesn't have a lot of lakes that ice up. They're mostly north, Flagstaff, Pine Top, Lakeside area, that whole like rim area, which is fairly extensive actually, but the amount of bodies of water for size, there's more smaller ones than there is larger in size, like some lakes like Lake Michigan, Erie, some of the ones that they really ice fish a lot. So it can be a little different because it won't get as cold when ours ice up as it will in those states. Those states, we're talking they can go 20, 30 below, and you're going to have to be in a hut with a fire going or some type of heater because guess what? You're going to fucking freeze if you don't. And I've done the ice fishing thing before. It's an experience. I love it. But I really don't like to do that here in the state because it's just different in the mountain ones as opposed to those type of lakes. So, it is what it is. But it's definitely slower unless you get that technique and you get it popping. So right now, and it should be on its way pretty soon, I have another order of jig heads coming from my friend Michael Harriman, who's up north. Michael is the primary owner of Juggernaut Custom Jigs. His wife does the cleanup and painting, and they're both really talented at what they do. They really are. I would rather get a dozen and weight of any size, particular size and hook type from them than walk into a store and get them because the quality is much higher because it's two people doing it as opposed to like a whole factory or a whole environment with 20, 30 people. It's much different when you are accountable for everything you do. And I understand that because I had my own business with my first wife, so I get why that quality control is there. But Michael and his wife go above and beyond even what small business people would do. So now I've got these ones that have a couple of different, like this newer red background type of eye, 3D eye, and I think silver, in two different sizes in a glow white. Because even in our lakes, even though they're like kind of green and murky, but you can still see a fair distance on most days, the visibility kind of goes away when you go deep. Well, what on our lakes happens is, where our average depth is anywhere from 20 to about 45 feet in most areas. You get some pockets where you're in between channels of the mountains, as they call them. In this state, they're not fucking mountains, okay? They're really not. They can get up to 100 foot. And if they're by the dam, it can get up to about 140 foot. Depends on the lake. So we can do a lot of deep jigging. Now, even during the wintertime, there will be pockets of fish that will be shallow, but they'll be in the rocks. So for me, I like to drop a relatively light jig. I don't like anything really super heavy unless I'm going deep. So I've stayed in the 124 to 132nd. I think I got a few 148s, and the vast majority of them are from Juggernaut Custom Jigs and Michael Harriman and his wife. I do have some number 2s from him. They're I think they're 3/32 and 1/8 ounce, but I really don't go much beyond that in weight. Now, if I was going for a striper, I probably would buy some from him that he's got new series coming out in the heavier ones to get down deep with like anchovies and whatnot. So I could probably buy some more of those, but I'm not doing that at this moment. So if and when I'm going on a boat with Michael, if and when I'm going on the boat with my friend Jim, which is what I usually do, I take those things along. Now, it's been really tough lately, even for the pros in this state, to get on them and get a pattern down, because the weather's been fluctuating horribly this year. Like, it's fucking retarded. Usually it's like hot, cold, and that's it. Even during monsoon, it'll still be hot. It'll just be rainy. But it hasn't been like that this year. It's been up and down and up and down. So it's confused the shit out of the fish. But I think now that it's kind of leveled off and it's staying cooler most of the time, that they'll sit in a pattern where they'll be active. Maybe not that bitey, but if we use jigs tipped with minnows, especially if they're glow ones, that might breed some success where there was none before. So I'm looking forward to getting the ones that are coming my way, because they're a little bit different than the rest of the ones I have, and they're a really popular color. Now, I also want to get some jig bodies that are in a color that complements that glow white. So I got to get a hold of Chaw Lee, who has a jig body company, to get some of those micro half-inch jigs, these jig bodies he's making now. I've got 2-inch and I've got 3-inch, but I want some half-inches, and it will make a huge difference if I get those smaller ones, so I don't have to take the ones I have and bite them in half, so to speak. It doesn't look right. When they're made the right way from the start, they look much more natural. So things are progressing on that level with me. I do a lot of slip bobber fishing. I've started doing a lot of just straight down jigging again, even though I prefer jigs on slip bobber even then. Because if you see them on depth finder at a certain depth, you can easily just pull your slip bobber to that length and get them in there. So I'm going to see what happens the next time I get on Jim's boat. Hopefully by then I'll have those jig heads and see what I can do. If it's good, I'll show the jigs and all that, and show what I did, show what me and Jim both did. Because I share everything with my friend Jim. It's, par for the course. I mean, he takes the time and money to take the boat out. We share food and drink expenses most of the time, and we get along very well when we're on a boat. So we'll see what happens when we go out next time. The last time we went out together, it wasn't really that successful. So we got to hit on them sometime. We both know enough about fishing to get it done. It's got to happen at some point. It has before.